You ever have a neighbor so obsessed with control that she'll call the cops on you for standing in your own yard? Because I have. And let me tell you, I never imagined my quiet mountain retreat would turn into the front line of a suburban Cold War. But there I was, on a Saturday afternoon, just hanging out with an old college buddy, tossing a frisbee behind my cabin, when the self-appointed queen of the HOA, Brenda, showed up in her golf cart, like a one-woman SWAT team. She was waving her arms, barking something about common area and unvetted guests, and I remember looking at her and thinking, "Lady, you have no idea who you're dealing with." Because while Brenda ruled by laminated maps and loud opinions, I was a professional GIS analyst, the guy who draws the real property lines for a living. You know what I mean? My job is literally untangling where one person's land ends and another's begins. I bought that cabin because I wanted to breathe a little easier, get away from city nonsense, hike the woods grill with friends, and just, live, not get dragged into some neighbor drama. But there she was, red-faced and righteous, acting like she owned the mountain. She tells me, "This is common land. You can't have guests here." I tell her, "The survey stakes are right there. This is my property." She rolls her eyes, calls it my interpretation, and threatens me with an HOA violation. Let me back up a sec. See, Brenda had built her little HOA empire on ignorance and an old marketing map from the 80s that was more wishful thinking than reality. Meanwhile, I had county deeds, GPS coordinates, and decades of legal surveys at my fingertips. So when she called 911 on me for daring to stand on my own grass, yeah, that happened. It was like declaring war on a guy with a digital nuke in his back pocket. The next Monday, after the deputy, who honestly just looked tired, told us to work it out with the HOA, I tried to be the bigger man. I walked up to Brenda's porch. She was out there fussing with her rose bushes, all perfect rows and attitude, carrying the official county survey. I showed her where my line runs a good 30 feet past where we'd been standing. She barely glanced at it, then came out with this full-color laminated HOA map, something a real estate agent probably doodled at a lunch meeting decades ago. See, she says green means common area. I tried to explain plat map versus sales brochure, legal versus decorative, but it was like explaining Wi-Fi to a goldfish. She didn't budge. Instead, I get a violation in the mail, $100 for unauthorized use of common property and unapproved guests. That's when my frustration turned into cold, clear resolve. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was abuse of power. So I did what any good nerd would do. I went full forensic, pulled every deed, plat, and legal document for the neighborhood, scanned and digitized everything, cross-referenced surveys from the original developer with modern aerials, and started to see cracks not just in Brenda's story, but in the entire map of our subdivision. Turns out Brenda's common area didn't actually exist, at least not the way she claimed. The real HOA only owned 2 tracks, a tiny park and a utility strip. The rest private property, including my yard. Her authority was nothing but smoke and green highlighter. But then things got interesting. As I layered data using the same precision I'd use for any paying client, I found discrepancies in the old surveys, especially up around the cul-de-sac where Brenda and her board buddies lived. The main survey monument, a hunk of brass in the pavement, was off by 15 feet. That meant a cascade of errors, property lines were skewed, lots overlapped. And here's the kicker. Brenda's beloved rose garden wasn't even on her lot. Neither was a third of the expensive community gazebo she'd raised dues for, which, as it turned out, was partially built on protected county conservation land. Yeah, you heard right. She called the cops on me for a frisbee while she was running a rogue construction project on public land. The hypocrisy was enough to make a saint roll their eyes. So I put together a plan. First, I hired a licensed surveyor, Tom Guy, with 30 years in the field and zero patience for drama to resurvey the whole area, especially the cul-de-sac and common spaces. Second, I quietly notified the HOA board, not just Brenda, that I contested the violation, citing county records. No surprise they ignored me. Third, I locked down a 10-minute spot at the annual HOA meeting, a boring-sounding agenda item about plat corrections that would put most people to sleep. Brenda never saw it coming. A week before the meeting, Tom's survey was in confirming everything the monument was misplaced. The garden and gazebo were over the lines. The whole subdivision needed a reality check. I printed out giant color maps annotated with the new survey lines and made enough copies for every household. The night of the meeting, the room was packed. Everyone was there for the promised showdown. Brenda started with her usual routine, smirking like she'd already won. When it was my turn, I walked up, plugged in my USB, and started with her own laminated map on the big screen. "See this?" I said. "This is what we've been using to enforce the rules." The crowd murmured. Next, I showed the county plat. "This is what the law actually says." Murmurs turned to real whispers. When I got to the overlay showing her roses and the gazebo slicing into land, they didn't own her face drained of color. She tried to interrupt, saying, "This isn't the place for personal issues." I shot right back. "This is exactly the place. This is about the truth." Then I laid out the big one. The gazebo was built illegally on conservation land, putting the whole HOA at risk of fines and legal action. You could feel the room shift: fear, then anger, then a hunger for answers. People turned on Brenda. The old guard board sat speechless. Even the quiet neighbor, Mr. Miller, piped up. "So you've been ticketing me over my mailbox color while you've been trespassing on my yard for 5 years. Another neighbor chimed in, "Why didn't you ever check the surveys?" The chaos was instant. Then Arthur, an old civil engineer, nobody ever noticed before, stood up and called for a vote of no confidence. Brenda and her cronies were gone in 10 minutes, replaced by a new board who actually listened. What followed, county officials came out, confirmed the violations, and ordered the gazebo's partial demolition. A construction crew sawed off the illegal third and hauled it away. Brenda had to dig up her precious roses herself under Mr. Miller's watchful eye. Her power, her status, her smug patrols around the neighborhood, all gone. Her laminated map was pulled down, replaced with a certified copy of the new survey. Life got a whole lot better. The air felt lighter. The HOA started operating on facts, not feelings. People paid attention, checked real documents, asked real questions. I ended up joining the new architecture committee, helping make sure no one else ever fell for the old Greenbelt myth again. Looking back, I learned something about standing up for yourself and your community. Sometimes you try the nice way, reason, facts, patience. But sometimes you have to fight misinformation with the truth, even if it means a showdown in front of 50 neighbors. My quiet expertise, the stuff I thought was just for my job, turned out to be the very thing that saved us all. And I gotta say, using your unique skill to set things right, that's the best kind of revenge. So let me ask you, ever had to use your own superpower to fight back against injustice? Drop your story in the comments, because honestly, I think we need more folks willing to call out the Brendas of the world, don't you?